again.
True. We talk about the impact that had on two franchises, as you say, Colin. This one that we're going to talk about ripples out in so many different directions. It's almost unfathomable. And this is the Eli Manning, Philip Rivers draft day controversy, where Eli refuses to go to the Chargers, and it not only impacts on the Giants and the Chargers, arguably the Steelers, possibly the Saints, and many other franchises beside, because the main characters in this drama obviously are Eli Manning and Philip Rivers. Eli gets drafted by the Chargers, and as you rightly said, emboldened by the stance that John Elway had taken and the leverage that he managed to exert in his own standoff with the Colts some years before, decides, no, I'm not going. And even to this day, the reasons why he's so dead set against the Chargers, unlike the Elway narrative, are not kind of fully understood. You know, you hear some persuasive arguments either way, and I've heard an interesting one emanating from reports around Tom Condon, who was Eli's agent at the time and who also was Drew Brees' agent. And Condon apparently was very unhappy with how the Chargers had treated Brees. That kind of poisoned him against them as a team. And he whispers in Eli's ear, according to one of the popular myths, and it may be true, it may not be, and that helps turn Eli. Other people point to Archie, Eli's dad, and say for some reason Archie didn't want him to go to the Chargers. Archie was dead set on him going to New York. Archie has completely denied that and said, never make decisions for my own kids. It was Eli's choice, and Eli decided what he wanted to do. But whatever the reason, it's quite a dramatic flip on draft day, which sends one player in one direction, another player in another direction. Philip Rivers then ending up going to the Chargers, arguably then paves the way for Brees to go to New Orleans. And all of this time, Ben Roethlisberger is still on the board and could have been the other quarterback chosen by either of those teams. He ultimately then ends up going to the Steelers. So by my count, that accounts for the ultimate destination of 5 different Super Bowl titles.
It's mad to consider. With Archie, the story that seems to be out there is that Archie had obviously, they'd gotten to know Ryan Leaf in the lead up to the draft, where himself and Peyton went 1 and 2, and that Archie spoke to Ryan Leaf, and Ryan Leaf didn't have great things to say about the Chargers at that time, and that is why he advised Eli not to go there. Who knows? As you said, there are so many stories on this, but it was the fact that Eli had both Archie and Peyton. You know, I mean, he had NFL royalty to lean on. That's what gave him the leverage, because this wasn't the Elway thing where he said, you know, he could walk away and play baseball, but he was able to say, well, look, I've got Archie and Peyton in my corner, so I've got to force this. I think there's so many. Like, the question is, did the universe have it predestined and preordained that Eli was to, you know, be the Tom Brady avenger, and that for all of the karmic luck that Tom Brady had, that Eli was destined to forever beat him in the biggest games? Now, if he had gone to the Chargers, that would have been the AFC Championship game rather than Super Bowl. So, you know, it could be different. Could the Chargers have a ring? Was that preordained, or was it the New York magic that led to that? The other piece, I suppose, in this, as you mentioned, is around Brees and Brees moving on. The Chargers, it was the injury, so they wouldn't give him the contract. They only guaranteed $2 million out of 50. Interesting that, you know, that was the $50 million. We're now talking about Justin Herbert signing for 270 odd million or thereabouts. If, like, there were ultimately, it comes down to the Saints and the Dolphins in the last two standing in the Brees sweepstakes, and Brees goes to the Saints because the Dolphins have issues around worrying about the physical side of things. Now, if Drew Brees doesn't go to the Saints, what does that mean for that franchise, that city, for Sean Payton? But if he had gone to the Dolphins, what would it have meant for the Dolphins? And what would it have meant for Nick Saban, who ultimately doesn't get him. And then he pushed really hard, and he was very disappointed that it didn't happen. He felt it undermined him a little bit. Ultimately, things don't go right there. But if Breeze goes there, is it different? Does Nick Saban not end up in Alabama? And what does Nick Saban not being in Alabama mean for college football over the past 15 years? So again, like there's so much to all of this. And I mean, the Roethlisberger piece is another piece. And I think what's interesting is, like, you look at it, and like the debates amongst a lot of these, I suppose, will Philip Rivers will probably make the Hall of Fame. I mean, I know Chargers fans certainly want him to be in there, but there'll be a debate. And I know Giants fans feel very strongly that Eli should be in the Hall of Fame. But again, there's a little bit of a debate. And Roethlisberger will very likely be in the Hall of Fame. Again, there will be some debate amongst fans. So it's all of these QBs are very, tied in so many different ways. But without the backing of the Manning royalty, there's no way a player would have been able to leverage it in the way Eli was able to.
Can you make the case, though, Colin, that if it goes the other way, if Eli does relent and stay with the Chargers and Rivers goes to the Giants, I wonder, do we still end up with almost exactly the same scenario? Like, I think it's a fair case to stack up that Rivers is good enough to have won those 2 rings. And I think it's a fair case that maybe Eli doesn't quite have the talent around him in San Diego to win. Although with your excellent points and obvious caveat that he clearly had the kryptonite for Tom Brady's Superman.
Eventually, I mean, ultimately, yeah, Rivers was probably the more consistently better QB if you were to look across their careers, right? Ultimately, but in the biggest game, Eli had the moxie that you wish, like if Peyton had Eli's playoff attitude and his inability to just not worry about pressure or expectation or the biggest stage, how many rings could Peyton Manning have? Because Eli came alive when it mattered most. And it's not just helmet catch. It's the throws down the sideline. It's everything else that goes with it. It's just not feeling the pressure. And no matter what the Patriots try. But again, remember, this guy's going up against Bill Belichick. Like, he's going up against an absolutely ferocious defensive mind. It doesn't matter to him. So that's the piece. You'd wonder, would Rivers have ultimately been able to do that in the biggest moments? I do think there is something kind of quintessentially Eli about the Giants winning it, and I just don't know if any other quarterback, because it is that kind of equally cursed as blessed piece, right? Eli gets to win those 2 rings, but the rest of it is kind of, it's 6 out of 10. But then there are those 2 absolute incredible standout seasons and games that are rightly. And hey, as a fan of the Denver Broncos, am I glad that Eli was able to stop Tom Brady when we needed him to.
Yeah, well, look, we can do the whole Eli debate for a separate hour. I somehow suspect, to some people he's Nick Foles or Jeff Hostetler with 1 more ring. To other people, he's got twice as many rings as Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees. So you can go either way on the Eli debate, as you say. No doubt over whether he showed up in the big games. He certainly did that. Another guy who showed